Welcome to Media Path. I'm Fritz Coleman.
And I am Louise Palanker.
We're here to get you through quarantine and beyond with entertainment ideas, whether they be books or movies or TV shows, everything from documentaries to deep state dating services. You'll find something you like right here. Plus, we get to talk to interesting people like our guest today, who's been a friend of mine for many years. Nobody knows the entertainment business and the people in it better than he does. He's a freelance writer, an author, a literary agent, a former Burbank City mayor, David Laurell. Can't wait to talk to David. But Weezy, first, what do you have for us to learn about this week?
Well, we've all been spending our pandemic swapping viewing tips via Zoom with our friends and family. And the conversations usually begin with, oh, have you seen that show? I think it's called The Way Forward, or A Place in the Life of Us. And I just think in these difficult times of COVID and streaming, they should really just call every movie what it is, like Meryl Streep on a ship. Then you can find it. Or George Clooney in space.
Yeah, they're really ambiguous. This Is Us is too ambiguous.
It's just like a collection of words, okay? So I watched the one they are calling Let Them All Talk. And it's from Steven Soderbergh, and it's starring Meryl Streep, Candice Bergen, and Diane Wiest. It tells the story of a famous author who is about to receive a prestigious award in England, and she cannot fly. And so her publisher books her on the Queen Mary for a transatlantic voyage. In the hopes of resolving age-old conflicts, she brings two dear and conflicted friends, Diane Wiest and Candice Bergen, and her devoted nephew, played by the kid who is in all the movies with a kid, Lucas Hedges, and thus Meryl Streep on a ship. I love this movie. It's got a quiet, thoughtful tone to it. The conversations feel natural and even ad-libbed, perhaps, but the characters are talking about the things that really matter: friendship, hurt, betrayal, hope, longing, fear, healing. And while learning very little about the details of key events, you do learn everything about the ways in which they feel impacted. Such outstanding performances, and for 2 hours, you are on a ship with Meryl Streep.
What's wrong with that? That's two Meryl Streep movies in 1 week. We did Prom last week, and that was good.
Yes. There cannot be enough. What do you have?
Well, my first pick this week is a Netflix show. It's called Death to 2020.
Saw it.
This is... It's a mockumentary of a look back at the hell that was last year. It's a British production, and they show clips and they analyze and they lampoon what has been deemed one of the worst years in human history. This is an hysterical hour of television. Cameos by Sam Jackson, Hugh Grant, Tracy Ullman, Lisa Kudrow, Leslie Jones, and many others. Some folks you won't know, but they will crack you up. Now, it's no secret the Brits have a much thicker skin than we do about skewering sacred cows, and they really have at it in this piece. It's familiar sound bites from the news of the past year with funny interpretations and full-blown snark by all the guest commentators. One of my favorites, Weezy, was Hugh Grant.
I know.
Who plays this arch-conservative British history professor who is off the chain funny with all his conspiratorial commentary. Tracy Ullman plays Queen Elizabeth, who had me in tears. I kept thinking how much more fun The Crown would be if she were the sovereign in The Crown. Lisa Kudrow does a spectacularly spot-on Kellyanne Conway. It's perfect. I'm just praying this look back becomes a yearly tradition on Netflix, and we'll do 2021 and on and on and on. It will be very therapeutic. I'm promising you to watch this as soon as you can. Did you like it?
Oh, I loved it. And so the first thing was like, this year, Fritzy, I was like, I'm not watching any retrospectives. I don't need to revisit any of this hellscape. But this movie, at first you're like, wait, because they'll give the expert like a lower third in the lower corner, and you're like, wait, and then you get it. Like, these are not actual people, because the names they give the experts are hilarious, and then you sort of recognize, oh, is that Tracy Ullman? Like, you start kind of thinking about it. I think you should watch it twice so that once you grasp what the concept is, they're just swinging for the bleachers on it, and it's so well done.
I'll tell you, I've always respected the Brits. Going back to the Monty Python stuff, they used to slay the Pope, and I thought, wow, that would never fly in this country. But there are no sacred cows in Britain, and there are some pieces there from this kid that I don't know, but he's a wonderful actor, about how the white community has tried to react to the Black Lives Matter era by overcompensating with their empathy for the black community. And it's really funny. With a kid driving through town with a bullhorn, "We're so sorry this is happening to you." And then they start yelling threats at him. And he goes, drive faster.
It's an actual dynamic. I listened to a podcast called Reply All, and they had an episode about how white people were just randomly sending black people money via Venmo. And it was like, it came up on some website, like, here's what you could do if you're feeling badly about, our 300 years of systemic racism. You could send $10 to a black friend. And so they interview black people that have randomly gotten money from a kid they went to college with. And it's just the strangest thing.
It's spectacular. Really well done. And Hugh Grant and Tracy Ullman as Queen Elizabeth. Come on, man. That's worth the price of admission right there. What else do you have for us?
So you've heard of Schitt's Creek?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot of people have heard of Schitt's Creek, but have not gone there. Or they've watched a little and they've said, I do not understand what's happening. So what your friends are probably telling you is, you have to commit to more of it. I'm telling you, I was like howling instantaneously because it's like a very stretched out sketch. So in the sitcom Schitt's Creek, a wealthy couple, video store magnate Johnny and his soap opera star wife, Moira, suddenly find themselves completely broke with only one remaining asset, a small town called Schitt's Creek, which they bought for laughs years earlier. This riches to rags couple and their two spoiled kids must face their newly minted poverty head on and learn and grow as humans and as a family. This is a brilliant piece of work starring Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Daniel Levy, and a cast of additional equally wonderful performers. The series allows actors with a background in sketch comedy to take characters and a premise beyond a sketch, building over time and creating story arcs and character development while exploring important themes. The results are entirely entertaining. People are saying, get past the first 2 episodes to get invested. I understand that if you are jarred by the severity of the characters initially, but I found it to be instantly entertaining.
I agree with everything you said, and it just always took me back to Second City Television with stalwarts like Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, which on any given week was infinitely funnier than Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Because they were this organic unit that was so funny and played off one another so well. And that goes into this. But the beauty of this, and the reason why I rooted for its success, and you saw it borne out at the Emmy Awards, because they won like 10 Emmy Awards, was that Dan, who was Eugene's son, is sort of the driving force behind this show. And he's hysterical as his own character. It's really one of the funniest shows on television. And they didn't win those Emmy Awards until they had wrapped. They were going to end their season. So I'm just wondering if public enthusiasm may get them to restart the machine and do some more episodes, because that'd be wonderful.
Well, it's initially a Canadian production that was sold to Pop TV, so it wasn't widely available until it went on Netflix, and that's when everybody started discovering it. Of course, you can sequentially watch whatever the hell you want on Netflix. You can sit there in a weekend and consume the entire show and catch up on what everybody else or everyone in Canada was already hip to. And so I think that's what Netflix really helped people gain access.
Yeah, I loved it. I love your pick. I love both of your picks this week. I'm going to see the Meryl Streep movie.
I have even one more.
Oh, I know. I'll be back. I'm going to do one that we've both watched.
Yeah.
It's another documentary because, we love us some documentaries. It's Billie. This is on Spectrum Video and on Prime Video. It's the story of arguably one of the greatest musical talents in the history of jazz and blues, Billie Holiday. And this film is 2 things. It's a really complete biography of Billie, and it's the story of this avid fan and journalist, Linda Lipnack-Kuehl, who spent 7 years in researching the life of Billie Holiday to do a book. Well, this author dies in 1978 under rather suspicious circumstances. She was found on a street in Washington, D.C. There was some mystery and controversy surrounding her death, but ultimately it was ruled a suicide. But Linda had over 100 hours of audio tape that she had recorded with Billie and the influential people in her life, musicians and managers and childhood friends and lovers, even FBI agents. There are jazz greats like Count Basie, Charles Mingus, John Hammond, Joe Jones, Sylvia Sims. They could all be heard doing their take on Lady Day's life.
And Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett, yes, when he was, before he was even famous, right? He said it was at the start of his career. Really spectacular. As a matter of fact, that's interesting, Weezy, because that really ties it to the present and amazing. Yeah. Anyway, Billie loved men and she loved women, and she was tough and tender. She was a singer, but before that, as a child, she was a prostitute. It's moving and it's disturbing. It's the talent and blemishes of this extraordinary energy force with no match in music, Billie Holiday. What did you think?
I was blown away.
Absolutely.
It was so beautifully produced. And they have all of these cassette recordings that this young woman did. She was kind of devoted to this obsession of figuring out what it was that contributed to the brilliance, the tortured brilliance of Billie Holiday. And she was well on her way. And then she just mysteriously dies in the 70s. So they have a beautiful way of stringing this all together. Her story with the story of Lady Day, and how childhood trauma can lead to brilliance, or if she was going to be brilliant anyway, she seemed to be addicted to being abused, which is extremely difficult to watch and absorb that concept without just wanting to run into the film and give her a big hug. Because she
exactly
just kept,
right.
She kept choosing men that were horrible, violent, and
because she didn't have a dad. Her relationship was with her mom, and there was such a poignant moment in there, and I can't remember the man's name, but it was the sax player in her band, and whoever was doing the commentary at the time said, first of all, Billie fashioned her voice after Louis Armstrong. She wanted to make her voice sound like Louis Armstrong's cornet, and when you think about it, her riffs and her jamming is almost the same, but she said she loved this saxophone player because the sound of his sax reminded her of an embrace by her mother. And that just blew me away. And her mom was the primary force in her life. But it was, if you're a music fan at all and an appreciator of this woman, you will see, she was complicated, but the research was amazing. As a matter of fact, this woman, Linda, the author, the deceased author, was asking such amazing questions that it was really making some of the people uncomfortable about the questions she was asking. And that was part of the fun, not fun, but part of the interesting aspect of it, listening to these people. Well, if you say that, how are you going to say this and all this? And it was really, it was wonderful.
She was a gifted journalist. I was going to mention that as well, Fritz. The questions that she asked were so perfect, and she followed the train of reason and logic. She didn't let anybody, get away. She kind of followed up on everything, and she asked beautiful questions that were really thought-provoking and that allowed people to perhaps share something that they would not have had they not felt heard. It was really, really interesting. This was a great movie.
Just from a business standpoint, I wonder who benefited from the final product. I mean, she owned the rights to the tapes, but the film was not of her making. So I hope that her family and her legacy will take full benefit from all of her hard work, because that was a spectacular piece of work. She was obviously a huge fan. It wasn't a typical thing.
Yeah, it's a great piece of storytelling, and I love when a story is told in a new and unique way. It just pulls you in. It's like reading a mystery novel.
Go ahead, dear.
I'm going to talk about one more thing.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it's a movie on Disney called Soul. Soul is a new animated film which you will find on Disney Plus, having lost its opportunity to open wide in theaters. Joe is a middle school band teacher whose life hasn't quite gone the way he expected. His true passion is jazz, and he's good. But when he travels to another realm to help someone find their passion, he soon discovers what it means to have soul. Joe Gardner is a middle school teacher. He's on the verge of cracking into the big-time jazz music scene when he tumbles down a manhole where his soul separates from his body, and he's faced with some important life-altering decisions. He finds himself transported to the great before, the place where all souls go before being reincarnated as newborn babies. And as he struggles to reconnect with his body, he's matched with a soul called 22, who has spent eons attempting to avoid life on Earth. These two have much to learn from one another, and they do so after some good old-fashioned body-swapping antics and soul-searching. Soul features the voices of Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey, among many great others, and it's a lot of fun. Very well done.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. And soul has two meanings. Soul because the guy's a black musician, but also soul in having a soul, which is
and
a lot of people are very moved by it.
And may I add, some of the best writing, some of the snappiest dialogue, it can be found in animated features.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're kind of missing it because you don't currently have kids or grandkids, and you have Disney Streaming Plus or whatever, just go check it out. There's some really, really great cinema in animation.
Very cool. Well, I'm so happy to introduce our guest and our friend, David Laurell. David is a multitasker of the first order. He's a freelance journalist for the LA Times and the Burbank Leader and the Outlook and other places. He's a literary agent. He's helped launch many celebrity biographies and autobiographies. He was seated on the Burbank City Council, and between 2002 and 2003, he was the mayor of beautiful downtown Burbank. And that's where I got to know him, as I made it a point to kiss the asses of the politically powerful in order to advance my own career. That's when I got to know David. My good friend, David Laurell. David, welcome.
Hey, Fritz, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you too, Weezy.
Thanks for being here today. You have in your collection, and you're sitting amongst many of these items right now, one of the greatest collections, one of the greatest catalogs of famous people that you have interviewed and befriended over the years, from Bill Clinton to Hillary Clinton to Kathy Bates to Dick Cavett to Muhammad Ali to Carl Reiner. And I wanted to start with, God rest his soul, Alex Trebek, who just passed a couple of weeks ago. And I'll just seize this opportunity to ask you if you have any special reminiscences about Alex. He was a lovely man, one of the smartest people in show business.
Boy, he sure was. What a class act. You know, I for many years, for 10 years, I was the editor-in-chief of a magazine called Life After 50. And as a matter of fact, we did a feature story on you, Fritz.
Right. I'm way past that now.
And so we did a feature story. Actually, we did a cover story on Alex. And after he and I had spoken for a couple times on the phone, I went out to the house, spoke with him. And he said to me, you know, you really should come into the studio when we do a taping, so you really kind of get a little bit of a better idea of how the show comes together. And so they invited me out, and they gave me carte blanche in the studio that day. As you, of course, both know, they do show one right after another, typically about 5 at least a day. And so in between shows, they take a couple of minutes for Alex to go and change and come right back and start doing another show. And they also do it in real time, live on tape, as they say. And it was funny because Alex let me have the freedom to walk around the entire studio, speak to staff members, speak to crew, speak to audience members. And he also let me bring a camera in, which is normally rather taboo in a show like that. But he was fabulous. And between every commercial break, he always used to look out into the audience and he'd go, now, where's David right now? Where is he? And he goes, what are you learning out there? And I remember at one point in time, he said, he's doing a story on me for a magazine called Life After 50. And he said, yes, you will all be there someday. And I'm here to let you know that there is such a thing.
That's adorable.
Yeah, I knew him. And my last encounter with him, although we were part of a couple of different nonprofits together, was we both spent 3 hours in the Burbank AAA waiting to get new tags for our license plates. And I thought, here's this guy who's had unbelievable success in show business. I'm just a weatherman, so I deserve to sit for 3 hours in the AAA. But this guy, wouldn't you have can't you have one of your minions come and sit for 3 hours in AAA? No. He's in there in a bad pair of shorts. We had a great conversation for 3 hours. He was a really down-to-earth, yet a brilliantly smart guy who I enjoyed knowing.
It's true.
Weezy?
Oh, well, we want to know about some of your other, today is going to be like Showbiz Story Day.
All right.
So I think you want to, one of the pictures that you sent me is a picture. I love celebrity pictures that contain a collection of people that you didn't know would ever be within the same frame. And so it's a picture of you, Dick Cavett, and Joe Namath. Please explain yourself.
That picture is probably the most important picture I own, with the exception of one of me and the former mayor of Toluca Lake.
Wow, some things have no value.
No, and I'll tell you what, when I was very young, when I was 8 years old, Joe Namath was my all-time hero. As I got a little bit older into my teens, Dick Cavett became my all-time hero along with Joe. And, I, as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, was not exactly the demographic that they were searching for on the old Dick Cavett show, his ABC show, late night show. And while I love Johnny, how do you not love Johnny? I was always more inclined to watch Cavett because I was fascinated with the people that he had on, and also fascinated in the way that he structured his interviews with them and the questions that he asked. So as the years went by, I always say that my life, my career has been about as Gump-esque, meaning as much like I am a real life Forrest Gump than anyone you can imagine. And I've had the most fortunate thing happen to me in my life, and that is that these two men who meant the world to me growing up and influenced me in more ways than I will really ever know, went on to become good personal friends. And when I say good personal friends, I mean, I feel like we're family. I go and visit them and stay at their homes, and we go out for dinner, and I know Joe's kids and his grandkids, and they feel like family to me. And when I go back east, I stay with Dick and his wife, Martha, and the stories that we have, I could go on and tell for time eternal, and they would probably only really mean something to me and Dick. But it really is an amazing thing that has happened to me in my life, that I have gotten to know both of these men. That picture, when Joe Namath's daughter got married, ironically, she got married at a church that was only a few miles away from a beautiful home that Dick has owned out on Montauk Point since the, early 1960s. And that picture was taken at a little barbecue reception that Joe and his ex-wife threw for his daughter Jessica the day before the wedding. And so he said, "You're staying with the Cavetts, please bring them out." And it was a wonderful thing. I'll tell you a really quick story. The party got a little bit out of hand, a little bit loud, and the Montauk residents were not exactly happy with the noise going on. And they sent a patrol car up. And as soon as the patrol car came up, Jessica, the bride-to-be, ran down the driveway and tried to explain. And finally, after not getting too far with it, she threw out the card of, my father is Joe Namath. And it didn't seem to really resonate too well with this 20-something officer. And she said, we have so many important people here like Dick Cavett. And the officer stepped back and he goes, "The Cavetts are here?" And he said, "Fine, no problem." He obviously went over to all of the rest of the neighbors and said, the Cavetts are involved with this thing. And all of the complaints stopped. And just so you know why, Dick was one of the people who made sure that all of this incredible property, hundreds of acres around the home that he owns out there, was never sold off to developers, and made sure that for time eternal it was protected wildlife reserve.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, over your left shoulder there at about the 8 o'clock position is Joe Namath's helmet from the Jets. Am I correct with that?
That's correct. Yeah,
Nice.
it's not mine. My career with the Jets was very limited.
Now I love him because he's looking good doing Medicare commercials on television. So things are going well for him.
Yeah.
Now, how did you meet Joe Namath? Did you tell your friends that he was coming to your birthday party?
Well, it's a story that has kind of gone down in history with a lot of my friends and Joe's friends. When my grandfather and father were huge football fans, big New York Giants fans, and at the time, this was in the early to mid 60s. The New York Jets were nothing, I mean, not that they were anything today, but they were truly nothing. As a matter of fact, they were the New York Titans. People don't remember that. But at the time, there was this harmonious conversion. They were just building this brand new stadium, Shea Stadium, that was done as a part of the whole New York World's Fair of 1964-65. So they built Shea Stadium. The New York Jets were brought over to this brand new sparkling stadium, and they changed their name to the New York Jets. And soon thereafter, they brought in this brash young quarterback from the University of Alabama. And of course, this was just sucking up all of the headlines in New York City. I grew up in New York as a kid. And so while my father and grandfather liked that other team who played at Yankee Stadium, I was obsessed with Namath and the Jets. And so my grandfather got us tickets and we went to games. A couple years in, when I was 10 years old, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so, of course, that's the worst thing that can happen to a kid, especially when you're 10 years old. And he was diagnosed in the early part of the summer of 1968. And it was a very bad summer for our family. And as the fall came, the football season started. And as a 10-year-old kid, I started to direct my focus to what was happening with the New York Jets. And so it was kind of my salvation away from what was happening in my real life. And they started winning games, and they won more games, and they won more games, and they ended up going to the playoffs and to the Super Bowl and won their one and only Super Bowl, of course, Super Bowl III. And so, as a matter of fact, Super Bowl III took place 3 weeks after my father passed away. So here was this horrible thing that happened, and yet now there was, a reason to live to see the next season for the New York Jets. That word got back to people at the New York Jets, and they were so kind and wonderful, and they made sure that I got to meet some of the players, including Joe. And if you ever have the opportunity to get to meet Joe, you'll understand this. He's just a warm, wonderful, embracing person. And he has been throughout my entire life. I'll tell you a really quick story. He and a teammate, John Dockery, for many, many years ran a football camp back east. And when I first heard about it, I was 15, and I saw an ad for it in the paper, and I said to my mother, I'm going to go. I want to go to the Joe Namath football camp. Now, my mother was not a fan of contact sports. She was a nursing supervisor and had seen too many injuries at the time. And so she said, I think, hey, how about I get you a set of weights for Christmas? And, maybe you can build up a little muscle, and maybe next year. And what she basically was doing is she was doing that every year to age me out of camp. So one year, years later, I was at Joe's house in Florida, and it came up that they were still doing the camp, and I had no idea he was still doing it. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. When I was a kid, I wanted to go to that camp so badly. And my mom just was not into it. And part of our conversation, we went on. I got back home to California, and a couple days later, the phone rings, and it's Joe. And we have our little conversation and small talk. And out of the blue, he says to me, when you were here, you mentioned that you always wanted to go to camp. And I said, yeah, I would have loved that. He said, well, it's not too late. We still do the camp. He goes, why don't you come and be my guest this year?
Oh, my God.
I said, wow. Really, Joe? And he said, I would love that. I ended up going, and then went year after year after year after that, and not only had a wonderful time with Joe and his family, but I made some friends at that camp that have become some of my closest buddies in the whole world. And I guess I could, sit here and go on and on for hours about the things that Joe has done for me personally, and the things that I have seen him do for other people that no one will ever know. And to me, it's one of the greatest blessings and gifts in my life that I became friends with this person who I had such admiration for as a kid.
It kind of feels like your dad sent him to you.
Well, wouldn't that be a wonderful way to think about it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think he was the first big television era NFL star because of the Super Bowl and everything. I mean, there were, football stars such as they were before that, Newt Rockne and all the guys from college football and professional football, pre-TV. But he was the first guy with this huge presence because of the Super Bowl and all that television turned football into after that.
Well, and Fritz, I think also that, that was back in the era where the athletes were the clean-cut Johnny Unitas's and the, Mickey Mantles with the crew cuts. And here came Joe with the long sideburns and the long hair. And, he was a rebel by all means. And not only that, but he had a brilliant publicist who was really the first one to really get an athlete like Joe involved with doing commercials. And he did all of these famous commercials with Farrah Fawcett for Noxzema, and he did commercials where he shaved off his mustache. And of course, he did the commercial that people still talk to him about today every time they see him somewhere, which was a commercial for Beauty Mist pantyhose. And the whole theory behind the commercial, which was brilliant marketing, was Joe was wearing them. And the gist of the commercial was to pan up of his legs in the nylons. And then with Joe laughing, he said, now, I don't wear pantyhose, but if they can make my legs look good, they can make anybody's legs look good.
Man. Well, you came out here to work for Dick Clark. You had a great start in show business. Talk about that.
Well, Fritz, my background is all backwards. Most people go from the broadcast world into print. I did just the opposite. I had started out in radio like you did, and then went into television and had worked at a NBC affiliate in Fort Myers, Florida, then went on to a PBS station in Arkansas, the Arkansas Educational Television Network. And then while I was at Arkansas Educational Television, I was offered the job with Dick Clark. And came out, and boy, I'm telling you, that really was what changed everything with me. Dick was, I don't know, Fritz, Weezy, did either of you know Dick?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so a complex, interesting, dynamic individual. I grew up as a kid, just like I'm sure you guys, watching American Bandstand, and it was a complete time warp to find myself now working at American Bandstand and being in that room as Dick was doing the same, countdown of the top 10 that he did when I was watching as a little kid in Brooklyn. And it was interesting because, Dick was not the type of person to seek close relationships, especially with his staff. But I learned so much from him by working with him. And then years later, when I got involved with government and was serving on the city council and as mayor of the city of Burbank, Dick's offices, of course, were in Burbank, right across the street from NBC. And I got to know Dick and his wife, Carrie, on an entirely different level because they had parking issues. And, whenever you need parking issues, you become very close with the mayor.
Yeah.
Does that work? Does that work?
It always works.
Got it. Good tip. So Dick Clark Productions did everything.
Yeah.
Was he the first celebrity that had such a 360 take on what you could do?
Weezy, boy, you think back of the people before him. Obviously, Steve Allen had his hand into so many different things. And there were others, but, people forget Dick was the first person ever. And I don't know, you would have to do some research on this. Maybe he's the only person ever. He actually simultaneously hosted shows on all three of the major networks at the same time. So, that's something that you don't see much today.
What's interesting is I'm flashing back to this encounter that I had with him at a convention where we were, how they would have the convention floor and then they'd have the suites at night. There'd be United Stations and, Premier Radio and
Right.
whatever. So he comes into the suite that I was in, and I reminded him that we worked together on the weekly top 40, and we were in a different suite, and he leans over and he said, "You don't talk about that in this suite." So maybe he just knew how to keep relationships kind of separate so that everybody felt important and there wasn't kind of any bleed.
Yeah, he, like I said, he was a very complex person. And the reason I say that is because most people who watch Dick on television, whether it be on American Bandstand or bloopers and practical jokes, he came across as this wonderful, friendly guy. And he was that, of course. But in the real world, he was a pretty down and dirty, cutthroat business person. And you have to be in the entertainment business, especially when you're dealing in music and film and television, as he was. And if there's one thing that I learned from Dick, it was this. And I've used this in so many elements of my career, especially in magazine publishing over the years. And that was that if anyone could produce any major television production could produce an award show. But Dick figured out a way to do it that it looked better than anyone else could do it at a fraction of the price. And of course, because of that, he got a reputation of being kind of, close with the money that he spent, and he was. But it was just a matter of realizing that every dime meant something. And if you were a production company and you were spending thousands of dollars on craft service, maybe you weren't utilizing your money in the place that it was going to be best noticed in the final product.
Well, I will interrupt you by telling you that when covering Dick Clark events, we would order pizza. We'd be backstage for 6-8 hours, 0 food, 0 water. And we would just order pizza and send someone out to the parking lot to meet the guy, because there were no cell phones. But that's what you did. You just learned, this is a Dick Clark production. We're not going to be getting fed. Pack a lunch.
Well, I'll tell you a really quick little story. And I'm telling a story out of school here, but wherever Dick is, I'm sure he would get a laugh out of this. Do you remember the show Putting on the Hits with Alan Fawcett?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah? Oh my
that was fun. Yeah.
You and me and Alan.
I love stuff like that.
Well, anyway, Dick was the executive producer of that show. And we would bring contestants in from all over the United States. And as I was saying before with Jeopardy, we would do the whole season in a matter of 2 weeks, because we did 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. And as contestants were eliminated from the show, they would then be sent home. And everyone was kept in holding on a stage at Paramount. I'm sorry, we did that at Universal. And every day, they were free in the evenings to go out and have dinner wherever they want, but they were held captive in a stage during the day while we were taping the shows. And unlike any other production that would have catering come in, Dick would go out and never even gave anybody a choice. If you were vegetarian or whatever, he would go out, they would go out and they would get Kentucky Fried Chicken box 3-piece lunches for everybody, and they cost $4.95. And to make it worse, they had a production assistant who would go around to all the contestants and collect $5 from them.
No,
to pay for their own lunch. And the thing about that I always felt was the kicker of the story is they made 5 cents on each one.
Wow. Well, I have a great Dick Clark story. The thing that he mastered, going back to American Bandstand, was the trait that they felt was cosmically transmitted into Ryan Seacrest, is that he offended nobody on television. He was acceptable to the broadest swath of humanity. Everybody liked him because he had this warm broadcast delivery and warm persona, and Ryan has very much the same thing.
And for 39 years at KNBC in Los Angeles, you did the exact same thing, Fritz.
At a slightly different tax bracket, but thank you for mentioning that. But I'll tell you the Dick Clark story, and you know this better than I do. He inserted himself in every aspect of his product.
Oh, yeah.
So they produced bloopers and practical jokes down on stage 3, which was next to the Johnny Carson stage, because Ed McMahon was one of the co-hosts of that show. And one day I'm coming up into the newsroom after the 5 o'clock news, and I hear the page, Fritz Coleman, Dick Clark on line 5, or Dick Clark. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's he want? Maybe he wants, many times producers would call me and want weather for location shoots, and I would do that. But Dick Clark was a big deal. So I went back to my desk and took the call. And it was Dick Clark. And he goes, the other day you were on TV and you were doing the weather and you were standing in front of a picture on the green screen, one of those fixed position cameras that aimed at downtown LA, and this giant bird came and sat on the lens of that picture, and you said it looked like a pterodactyl. And that cracked me up. He said, do you mind if I use that on bloopers and practical jokes? I said, heck no, I don't mind. That was awesome. But Dick Clark called me himself to ask me if he could use my clip for bloopers and practical jokes. Of course, I didn't get permission from the station, and they went ahead and used it, but that was my claim to fame. It was a 5-second video of giant... I got no pay for nothing.
Did you get permission from the bird?
That's right. He signed a non-disclosure agreement. And
well, you know what, Fritz? I'll tell you something. And, this goes back to the lesson that I learned from Dick about, especially if you're doing a magazine and you have a limited budget, how can you make it look as great as possible on a limited budget? And I always thought, what would Dick Clark do? But I'll tell you about when we did bloopers and practical jokes on Stage 3 at NBC. Every time Dick would have to lease out that studio from NBC facilities, it would cost him a fortune. He had to have a lighting grid put up, the set brought in, everything, all the camera set. So here's a little thing that people never knew, but it's the brilliance of Dick Clark. Dick only leased the studio out once per season. So we would do the very first one with Ed, and he'd have a studio audience in there. That was it. From that point on, they would just bring in a very small piece of the set. Dick and Ed, if you ever noticed, wore the same suits and ties throughout the whole thing. They would always come over to the office, which of course we were right across the street from NBC. They would get 50 staff people all sitting in the first 3 rows, and it made for a cutaway, and it made it look like Dick and Ed were doing all of their cut-ins. And then, of course, they would throw it to the videos. There was no one else in the audience except us staff members, and the wide shots were all from just that one time that they actually used the studio with an audience.
That's really great. Well, Bob Hope did a similar thing, and you know this because this happened while you were the mayor of Burbank. He would go into the Tonight Show, and they would go into the stage on a Friday afternoon, and at the end of the show, when Johnny's show had wrapped, somebody would come out on the stage, one of Dick's, Grant, what was his name? You knew him.
Yeah, sure.
Grant was his man. And he said, we have a great surprise for you. If you're willing to stay, we'd love you to stay. We're going to have Bob Hope come out, and he's going to do his monologue for his next Christmas special. And we'd love you to hear these jokes and react to it and everything. And the audience went nuts because they're getting this special treat. So Hope didn't have to bring his own audience in. They rolled out these cue cards, which were the size of billboards. He had these with printing like 2 feet high. And he would do a half-hour monologue that they would edit down in the Christmas special to 6 or 7 minutes, just as an add-on to the Johnny Carson show. So Bob Hope, as you probably know better than I, was a frugal man as well with the expenses. It was so funny.
Hey, Fritz, by the way, while we're talking about NBC, the very first time I ever met you was in the hallway of NBC. You were running through the hallway, going over to the studio, and I'm going to bring up 2 names that will not mean much probably to anyone other than you and me. But you, of course, remember Sandra Willis.
Absolutely. She was the head of press and publicity or community affairs for NBC for many years.
She was. When I worked at the NBC affiliate in Fort Myers, Florida, I had gotten to know Sandra. And then when I came out here, she said, oh, we've got to get together. And she and I became friends. And she knew I was working for Dick Clark. And I told her I had all of these great ideas about what I wanted to do and be in my career. And she said, there's a guy you should meet. And I said, okay. He said he works in the building right across the street from us, the old Catalina building. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went over to meet this guy who she recommended that I go and meet. And his name was Frank Neumeister.
Oh, yes, I remember Frank. Frank worked at NBC for like 50 years, had some astonishing career.
He knew every nook and cranny of that building. And so he brought me on a full tour through all the studios and all the production facilities. And as we were walking out of the Tonight Show studio, he said to me, this is where they used to do Laugh-In, and this is where they used to do the Gong Show. And just as he was telling me what else they used to do, Fritz Coleman walks down the hallway. And that was the first time I ever saw you in the flesh, long before you ever became the mayor of Toluca Lake.
That was one of the most important days in your life, David. What a banner day.
You can tell I remember every nuance.
I love that building. That building was like a museum of broadcasting, just walking through there.
Now, let me get something straight. You were the actual mayor of Burbank, and Fritz, you were the honorary mayor of Toluca Lake. Explain to our listeners, what is the difference between actual and honorary politics?
Well, let me brag about you, David, so you don't have to be forced into it. Burbank City Council has a rotating councilship where every 2 years, another council member automatically becomes the mayor. And David had been a city council person. And he had to be elected, and he ran. And I remember driving down Olive Avenue and seeing David Laurell lawn signs for his election back there. And so he was very famous within the confines of Burbank. And what made him famous was not only his show business career, but because he was involved in politics. The difference with me is my job was an unelected position. I've been the honorary mayor of Toluca Lake for 25 years. And what you do is you just go until you cause embarrassment for the community, and then they'll replace you. There's no pay. There's no election involved. I can't even get a parking ticket fixed as the honorary mayor of Toluca Lake. He's a real mayor. I'm a fake one.
So, Fritz, you remain uncontested honorary mayor.
Absolutely.
Has anyone else vied for the seat?
No. People have been asked, but they refused the job, and they gave it to me.
Mm-hmm. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, one time you told me that you felt that the pressures of holding that office were sometimes something that kept you awake at night. I believe you one time told me that you felt that you had the power equal to that of Paul, the king of big screens.
That's right. Yeah. My only responsibility as the honorary mayor of Toluca Lake was on the first Friday of every December, I would light the monstrous 5-foot Toluca Lake Christmas tree in front of Ramsey Schilling Real Estate, thus beginning the holiday season along Riverside Drive. That was my only job. Well, but you were an actual mayor, and I'll tell you, you can talk about the politics in Burbank, because it's an industry town. It used to be an aerospace town. Some very complicated politics in that town, and you had to tap dance around a lot of issues when you were in.
Burbank is and has been a incredibly unique little city. And I say little city because people throughout the United States and even the world are surprised when they hear it's a little city. It's when I was mayor, there was only about 103,000 residents, about 38,000 private homes, 17 square miles. I mean, it's a very small city. And yet within the borders were, NBC flagship West Coast, and at the time, Black Entertainment Television, still Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon, and Yahoo, Warner Brothers, AOL. So here were all of these companies that had tentacles out in every corner of the globe. And they were all funneling tax dollars into the city of Burbank. So when I would go to other places in both the United States or even overseas, and they would ask me, what's the secret about how Burbank can be 12 miles as the bird flies from the second largest city in the United States, and yet you don't seem to have the problems that Los Angeles does? And I would always say, well, it has a lot to do with having a very small, manageable city with a tremendous tax base.
But it's an independent municipality. It's got its own power company, its own DWP, its own police department, and its own school district, right? So there's all the juggling that went on. I mean, I'm saying this because I don't want to underestimate. It wasn't my job is completely ceremonial. Some people don't even know I'm the honorary mayor, and I have been for 25 years. But yours was an honest to goodness, often complicated political job. I just knew of all the drama that took place in city council and all those things. And you've got all these media companies who are vying for your attention and want special treatment. You had the Burbank airport, which was expanding, and all those things that were going on. So it was an interesting time.
If you're shopping for great schools, go to Burbank.
Burroughs High School has some of the most talented kids.
There are great schools in Burbank, and they get the benefit of being in the heart of show business.
Mm-hmm.
Weezy, let me tell you something. There were many reasons why Fritz was the honorary mayor of Toluca Lake that he's not fessing up to.
Spill.
And that has to do with the fact that whether it was from Glendale or whether it was from Burbank or Toluca Lake or other parts of the of Los Angeles County, it was amazing of how Fritz gave so freely and so generously and in a heartfelt way of his time to so many charities. I mean, in the city of Burbank, whether I list off the Family Service Agency or if I list off the Boys and Girls Club of Burbank, if I list off, the Burbank Temporary Aid Center, I cannot come up with a nonprofit organization in the city of Burbank that Fritz was not always 100% behind and always willing to get out there and host an event and be a part of their event. And the best part about it is so many times when you have a celebrity come in and they're hosting an event, they show up, they go over their script and they're gone. That wasn't Fritz. Fritz was approachable and people loved coming up to you, Fritz, and taking pictures with you and telling stories. And there's no nonprofit in this city, and all the people who have benefited from it, who somewhere along the line don't have the fingerprints of Fritz Coleman on the fact that their life is a better life.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there because I'm so embarrassed. But
I love that, and I think that's absolutely true. And I think that Fritz he's uniquely gifted at this. He knows it, and he's someone who wants to give back. He wants to play to his strength, which is hosting these events, and so he's responsible for a lot of money being raised in the greater Los Angeles area.
Well, I'm so glad I invited you two here today for this love fest.
Now, before we
want to tell you, I have to respond to what he said because he was very kind to me. I often said that the community outreach aspect of my job was the best part of my job at NBC. And I always told people that on the personal satisfaction scale, doing all those things was much more soulfully satisfying than being inaccurate about the weather 4 out of 5 days a week. So I could put my head down on the pillow at night and rest.
Well, I want to talk about journalism for a moment before we wrap up the show, because you're a wonderful writer, David, and you just wrote a piece about Fritz and me and our podcast, Media Path, which we read, and it's going to go into the Burbank Leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to know what your take is on the future of local journalism. If there is a future, and if funding is a problem, or if our attention span is so diverted at this point that we can, fine tune what we read and consume during a day, and that doesn't include our local paper, or are people still keenly interested in the local journalism of the town within which they live?
Sure. And, Weezy, I wish I had the answers to those questions. But here's what I guess I can say. As Fritz alluded to earlier, the Burbank Leader, as a part under the umbrella of what was called Times Community News, was owned by the LA Times for many years. And the LA Times decided that they were going to discontinue a lot of their local community newspapers earlier in last year now, in 2020. And when they did, a newspaper group based out of La Cañada Flint Ridge bought the Burbank Leader and the Glendale News Press and kept them going. And I will tell you that in that interregnum period between the time that the Times decided they were no longer going to do the Leader, And then when it was picked up and saved by the Outlook newspaper group, boy, I heard from people, my phone has never rang off the hook so much of what can we do? How are we going to get local news? I think people really are so hungry for local news. They want to know what's going on in their own community. They want to know what's going on with their city council, with their local police departments, with any crime in their area, with the good things that are happening in their area, stories about their friends, stories about the schools. I will tell you, people love the sports when it has to do with all of the local teams, whether it be Burbank High School or Burroughs High School. So I think that there is always going to be a real true need for a local publication. Whether or not that's actually something that you hold on to and read, that I don't know. But,
you put your finger on exactly the dilemma that local television news is having right now, David. Unfortunately, print media is a little farther down the dark tunnel of unknowing that broadcast news is. I mean, you look at the LA Times, the Monday morning edition is like 5 pages long. But local news is having a difficult time. And you described it perfectly. There will always be an appetite and a desire and a need for local information, local politics, local school board issues, local infrastructure discussions. The question is the delivery system. How are people going to get this information? Yeah. Local news may end up being a podcast or an online streaming service. We just don't know, because streaming television is pushing the envelope with broadcast television because they don't have to deal with commercials. And so how are we going to adapt to streaming and still remain viable? Because prime time is the big moneymaker so you put your finger on it. We're just not as far down that dark tunnel that print media is, but it's a dilemma for all of us in local news dissemination.
And, we really don't know how much the new generation, I hate to sound so ancient, but I'm ancient, do 30-year-olds, do 20-year-olds, yes, they may have an interest in what's going on in their community, but do they have an interest in anything longer than a tweet or longer than anything that they can pick up as far as information on social media? Are they willing to sit and read an entire feature story? I don't know. I would hope so, and I would have to also hope that there's always going to be the segment of the population that is interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'll make one further comment about this, because this is something that's very close to my heart, what you're talking about, and I agree with everything you're saying. The difference is, when you and I and Weezy were growing up, media was a seller's market. You had 3 networks, you had Walter Cronkite, you had Huntley Brinkley, and whoever the guy was on the other channel. And people had to come to them for information. Now it's a buyer's market. The consumer controls the circumstances because of digital communication, because of social media, because of the internet. And what this has given birth to is generations, Gen Y, Gen X, of consumers of information who have vertical learning. That means, here's a real simple example of that. If you're interested in skateboarding and that's your passion, you read and consume a lot of information about skateboarding. So you might be the most knowledgeable person in your neighborhood about skateboarding, where you have little or no knowledge about other issues. When we were watching the news, Huntley Brinkley or Walter Cronkite, you got 30 minutes of a smattering of everything from culture to international politics to global money issues, whatever that was. You were sort of forced to consume a little bit of information about everything. Now, it's a buyer's market. You can only learn about what you want to learn about. So you have vertical information about stuff. So the problem is, how does a democracy continue if people only know a lot of information about a narrow area of interest? Kids don't have to expose themselves to politics from both sides of the spectrum. Kids don't have to become aware of school board issues or state politics. If they're not interested in it, they can avoid that topic completely. So the interesting thing about the future of broadcasting and the future of print journalism is, are we going to have an informed electorate? You know what I mean?
They can just as easily, they can barricade an ideology. So, as much as everything's available to you, only one narrow pathway is also available to you. It's all up to you. So if you want to just kind of streamline it to this is just, I'm sticking to this path and I'm not going to be distracted by people, that's fake news. Or do I want to know as much as possible about as much as possible? There's just different types of people, and some people only feel safe within the confines of their beliefs.
But that's dangerous, because sometimes you have to learn things. No, that's what I say when I say it's a buyer's market, Weezy. You're controlling the circumstances, which is very dangerous, You
totally create your own universe. And, I was talking to someone about this a while back, and I was blown away. I was talking to my wife's niece, who was a film school graduate, and I was blown away, shocked of who she did not know. Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers, and I was just amazed at what are they teaching in film school?
Mm-hmm.
And what I really basically have learned from younger generation is that they don't need to know anything, because anything they need to know is something that they need to know right at the moment. They look it up on their phone, they get the answer for when they need it, and then they can forget about it again, because they don't need to know that again unless they're ever questioned about that again in somewhere in the future. So there's no need for institutional knowledge when you have a device in your pocket that tells you anything you need to know at any given time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. If you needed to know the weather, you turned on the news and you sat through some news, and you hopefully absorbed some news on your way to the weather. Now you can simply pick up your phone. It tells you the temperature.
That's what I do. People come up to me like Bob's Big Boy and say, "What's the weather?" I say, "Look on your phone. I have a beard. Do I look employed to you? Look on your phone."
But the other thing is that makes it even more insidiously dangerous is that the internet and the technology is smart enough to listen to you and to reverberate what it is you're saying that you're interested in. It wants your eyes and ears for as much time as possible. So if you're clicking this way and this way and this way, it's like saying, "Oh, she likes this. Let's send her more of that." And then thus, subtracting the likelihood that you're going to go elsewhere to expand your width of knowledge. So yeah, the internet is kind of encouraging us to stay increasingly insular. So
well, very few people, unfortunately, are talking about this kind of thing, and you guys are. And you're doing a tremendous service. You're both the perfect people to be doing this, and I'm grateful for what it is that you're doing, and I hope that an awful lot of people start tuning in, and that you have great success with this program, because you're giving people a lot of things to think about that I don't think that they would normally otherwise thinking about.
Well,
David, we appreciate your support.
Yeah, we really do appreciate those kind words. And before we close, you describe your life as being Gump-esque. And I would love to hear you tell one story where you really did look up and say to yourself, "I cannot believe I am here right now."
Yeah. Well, believe me, that has happened so many times in my life that I can't even begin to pick one, but I will. And the reason why I will pick one is because Fritz and I have had a mutual brush with greatness, as I believe Mr.
Oh, I think I know where you're going.
And that is that we both crossed paths with the legendary Marlon Brando.
Oh, yes.
And someday, Fritz, you got to tell this story. But I will tell you that I got to meet Brando twice, once through Dick Cavett, and the second time through a grizzled old PR guy named Hal Bender at NBC, and I was only a kid. And I have a really lengthy, long story about my whole meeting with Brando that I won't go into. But this took place at 30 Rock back in New York. And as Brando was leaving the building, I happened to, and I say happened to, get on the elevator with him. And of course, an elevator is a small, dimly lit area. And he was in one corner and I was in the other. And I remember standing there looking at his face, and I was thinking, with only air between us in a small little elevator. The man who played Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar Named Desire, Vito Corleone in The Godfather, Paul in Last Tango in Paris, Jarrell in Superman. I mean, he's standing right there. And at that point in time, I think that I was in another place that I never thought I would ever find myself in.
Did you speak to him?
Oh, are you kidding? I have a whole long story we'll have to do another show on.
Well, we can do another show with your Brando story, but I think Fritz needs to tell his Brando story because it's just.
Oh, why not? Okay, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
I had done my first one-person show, It's Me, Dad. I had workshopped for a year at a little equity waiver theater in North Hollywood called Actors Forum. And ultimately, public television, local public television, KCET, bought the show to air it. And they produced it and they built a set for it down on their public television stage. And it was wonderful. And they used it as a fundraiser. And so the show's about an hour and a half. And we did the fundraising breaks. I had Chuck Henry and Kelly Lang come over and do the fundraising breaks. And this went from like 9 to 11 o'clock at night. And I got home that night completely exhausted and just sort of surfing on this experience of having had a piece of my work on public television. And I got a phone call at like 11:45. And it was, did you know Bodan Zachary, the producer from PBS, David, at all? He was their in-house executive producer. So he calls me up and said, write this phone number down. I said, okay. I wrote the phone number down. He said, I want you to call right now. I said, it's 10 minutes to 12 at night. He said, call. It's Marlon Brando, and he wants to talk to you. And so I had caca pants, and I had changed my pants, and then I called Marlon Brando, and all the same rush of thoughts came through my mind. Fortunately, I only had about 30 seconds to get really nervous, because if I had to think about this for a night, I probably would have never called him. And this was at a point in his life, I think it was kind of close to the end of his death, actually, but he had become the brunt of jokes about his weight and about his mental health and everything. And so I didn't know what to expect, quite honestly. And Mr. Brando, it's Fritz Coleman. He goes, I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed your show and how thoughtful it was and how poignant it was and what a great piece about fatherhood and alcoholism and all these things. He said, I just wanted to thank you. And then he said, where did you workshop the play? Did you take it on the road? And did you ever do it in large theaters? Then he started talking about doing all the out-of-town tryouts for Streetcar Named Desire and how Tennessee Williams would come in with new sides every night and not everybody could memorize lines fast enough. I had about a half-hour spectacular conversation with one of the great actors of all time. No indication of any of these punchlines that he had accumulated over the last little while of being off his rocker. He was a quirky guy because he was so insanely talented. As you know, David, he didn't suffer fools well. So I think that was part of his reputation.
That's a part of my story.
Yeah, he could not have been nicer. And it was, I kept his phone number in my handwritten phone book for many, many years. I no longer have it, but it was a very meaningful moment to me. He was really, we didn't talk about him. He wanted to know about me and the work process and how I wrote it and how it came into being and where we did it. It was amazing.
Oh, I love that story. Well, David, you're going to have to come back with your Brando story and more stories because we really loved having you with us. We would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where we are MediaPath Podcast. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, MediaPath Podcast. We would love to know what media you've been enjoying. You can contact us at our social media or email us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. I want to thank our wonderful guest, David Laurell. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Demanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Alex Gilroy, and you. I am Louise Palanker here with Fritz Coleman, and we will see you along the media path.